Let's welcome back to the show Fox Nation host Tomi Lahren. Tomi, I'd like you to listen to this. There's uproar over this. Biden's new disinformation czar, Nina Jankowicz, this is her fix to Twitter. She's saying people she deems, quote, trustworthy should be able to edit other people's tweets. Watch this.
I'm verified, but there are a lot of people who shouldn't be verified who aren't, legit, in my opinion. I mean, they are real people, but they're not trustworthy. Anyway, so verified people can essentially start to edit Twitter the same sort of way that Wikipedia is.
Thing, Tomi.
Oh boy, if censorship and shadow banning is an assault on free speech, what she's describing there is a war on free speech. And who is Nina Jankowicz to tell me if I'm legitimate or not? And who is she to tell me what is trustworthy, who is trustworthy, what algorithm should be put in place? And God forbid she ever edit any tweets. I wonder, and I know the fact of the matter is, we know from her past, would they edit the Hunter Biden laptop story? Would they edit the fact that the COVID vaccine does not prevent transmission or infection of the COVID virus? Would they edit the fact that the Wuhan lab leak was indeed something that's verifiable and something that needed to be checked up upon? She wants to be able to edit content because she is so afraid of the narrative being flipped or the truth getting out. She wants to be able to manipulate it, her and her gang of people that she deems trustworthy.
Well,
now, she's not trustworthy, she's not neutral, and she's reprehensible.
Well, she would have to hire an army of bureaucrats if she wants to edit Trump, if Trump gets back on Twitter, because Trump tweets a lot. But he's not going to come back on Twitter. He says he's going to go to his Truth Social, Tomi. And, Elon Musk is getting really hammered with personal attacks against Musk over this. What do you think of that?
Well, Donald Trump should absolutely be on Twitter if he wants to be on Twitter. Again, it's the left being so terrified of Donald Trump and being so terrified of the truth and somebody who is able to reach millions of people. But I'll tell you what, I think that the folks over at CNN and MSNBC would be cheering if Donald Trump came back to Twitter because it might help their ratings a little bit and give them something to talk about besides the myriad of Biden dumpster fires that are currently erupting around the country. But if Donald Trump wants to be on Twitter, he should absolutely be on Twitter, and his audience, I believe, would very much like that.
Germany's former chancellor, Angela Merkel, said it was, quote, problematic that Twitter banned Trump. France's digital minister, his name, it comes to me, here it is, Bruno Le Maire, he said it was, Le Maire rather, he said it was wrong to ban Trump. He was banned after the Capitol riots for inflammatory tweets. Watch Elon Musk on this, calling it morally wrong and stupid. Watch.
I do think that it was not correct to ban Donald Trump. I think that was a mistake because it alienated a large part of the country and did not ultimately result in Donald Trump not having a voice. He has publicly stated that he will not be coming back to Twitter and that he will only be on Truth Social. And this is the point that I'm trying to make, which is perhaps not getting across, is that banning Trump from Twitter didn't end Trump's voice. It will amplify it among the right. And this is why it is morally wrong and flat out stupid.
So you hear what he said, right? And now we have former Attorney General under Obama, Eric Holder, calling for an indictment of Trump, and MSNBC guests talking about more protests in the street against Trump.
They want to cancel Donald Trump, and the reason they want to cancel Donald Trump is because they're terrified that he's going to run again in 2024, and they're terrified he's going to win in 2024. If he was a has-been, if he was irrelevant, if he wasn't still the figurehead and leader of the Republican Party, they wouldn't care. They'd want him to keep talking, but they want to keep him on the sidelines. They want to keep him quiet because they are terrified of his influence, and we're seeing that across the country in primaries. Trump's endorsement is the only endorsement right now that matters.
Yeah, 58-1. 58 of his picks have won the GOP primaries. I think his pick for the Nebraska gubernatorial race, he failed there, but 58 is a pretty good track record. Watch CNN's John King say that Trump, yeah, he is a power broker. Watch this.
I said this at the top. A lot of people at home say stop talking about Trump. Donald Trump is the most dominant force in one of America's two leading political parties. And he is proving it again in this year's primary campaigns. And so for the people out there who want us to stop talking about Trump, that's not up to us. We have to cover these races where Trump's endorsement is clearly making a difference.
Yeah, 58-1. He's the candidates he's
not just
picked is
making
now
a difference,
winning.
like
yeah,
I
go
said,
ahead.
Not just making a difference, the only endorsement that currently matters, and I've said this on your show before, Liz, but I believe it wholeheartedly. I believe that Donald Trump, instead of running in 2024, should be traveling around the country, making sure that every person that he wants in office is elected. His endorsement matters. He should be the kingmaker and then step aside and let Ron DeSantis come into the White House in 2024. We would be unbeatable.
Tomi Lahren, thanks for joining us. Come back soon.